Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and I work with a lot of individuals with attachment wounds. I work predominantly with avoidantly attached individuals, either who are dismissive avoidant or fearful, but they typically are leaning avoidant. Dismissive avoidant. I work with couples, individuals, and sometimes families, and so I will see a lot of different dynamics. And today I wanted to go over a topic that is very requested in many different ways. And so I'm going to touch on many of those different ways in this video today, and is basically trying to understand, can detaching help an avoidant get closer to you? And detaching can sometimes help, but typically with an avoidant, it depends on what you consider detaching. Now, if you are detaching from your own triggers and leaning into healing, of course, this is going to benefit most relationships. However, if you're doing it to maintain control and to see if your partner is going to chase you, that is probably going to backfire. So that's the quick answer. So then what is the detail of all of this? Why are there so many elements to this concept? Well, one, and I think is something just kind of get right off the bat, is a lot of individuals are getting these concepts and ideas from different social media platforms or perspectives, or maybe even hearing it from their friends, that detaching is a way to get your partner to chase you. And this idea can definitely create a lot of lack of understanding of how relationships may work, at least playing out in the long term. And it's nobody's fault. But that's why I wanted to address this in this video, so that people have that knowledge, at least to some extent, right? I can't give you every piece of information I have, but I'm going to try my best. And so this is something I feel is very important. Detaching from an individual to make them chase you, the reason why this may not always be beneficial is the main reason is because chasing in of itself is a form of courting in the beginning of relationships typically. And if your partner is continuously chasing you, that means the relationship is lacking some form of stability, which is typically required for long-term commitment in relationships, marriages. A lot of y'all who are married or have been married, you guys know chasing is not always a requirement to feel love. And a lot of individuals, especially those who are anxiously preoccupied, they need a lot of reassurance with the fact that their partner really loves them. And chasing is a very obvious, prominent perspective and prominent variable in the relationship that allows them to be reminded, I am loved. But chasing actually has almost nothing to do with true and actual love. Somebody can chase you simply because they want something from you. It might not even be genuine. So equating chasing to being actually valued and loved sometimes can be where the issue lies. It's more important to recognize consistency. Let's say you have a partner, or actually, I have an example that is very similar to some patients that I'm seeing right now. Let's say with an avoidant person, let's say this person always, meets you on the dates that you guys plan, but they don't really text you in between. Even if that's not as frequent as some people would want, it's still consistent. Like if you look at their history, they are consistent with how they treat you. That is much better, at least from a healthy perspective of a relationship, typically, comparison to somebody who shows up every now and again out of the blue, but is completely romantic. You have a romantic time. The intimacy in the bedroom is amazing, but you're not getting that consistency and safety. So that's why chasing does tend to backfire in general, not chasing in of itself, but trying to maintain that control and detaching for the concept of being chased. It backfires because you're allowing yourself to still not recognize that love should be stable, to which you're leaning into your own attachment wounds, and you're creating the scarcity concept so that your partner can chase you in order for the relationship to continue to progress, which either means your partner's not giving you enough, you're not accepting it, or actually, I just thought about another point, you're not going to learn how to progress in that relationship. So when the relationship does become stable, you might not know how to react in it, which means you may pick fights. Those are just some examples. Now, before we get really into the depth of this, I want to bring up that I'm going to probably break this up into 4 pieces. The first one is actually healthy detachment, I guess, in a relationship. So about maintaining your sense of self is probably a better way to describe it. We're going to start there. And then after that, we're going to talk about unhealthy detachment, which is usually some sort of disconnect or emotional withdrawal. This is more common avoidant people do this, by the way, right? And that's unhealthy. Then we have another point of unhealthy detachment, which is usually in the means of indirect communication, basically of being unable to accept an outcome, basically trying to manipulate the circumstance. That's the third point. And then the fourth point we're going to talk about is how it backfires to try to maintain control by detaching. So those are the 4 pieces that we will get into today. And let's start with, the positive one. And part of the reason why some of you guys want to figure out, is there any sort of detachment in a relationship that's healthy? And the answer is yes. I don't know if I would call it detachment, but it sounds like a lot of people are. So I'm going to call it that for the sake of this video. But it sounds like it's about maintaining your sense of self, which, yeah, that definitely will help anybody get closer. This whole entire video might not even be just for avoidance. It's for anybody, any relationship, but there are going to be some specific pieces to avoidant individuals. But let's talk about healthy detachment, what it means to maintain your sense of self and what it looks like. So what are the benefits to doing that? Emotional independence. So basically, you're not relying on your partner to fulfill, all your emotional needs, right? You are reducing that codependency and you're trying to lean into a more balanced relationship. And so maybe you're in a bad mood and your partner is feeling stressed out about work. You're not going to call them to get assistance with your bad mood, at least not right away. You want them to decompress. And so you're taking time to process your own feelings. This, I think, is what some people call detachment. I would not call that detachment, but I guess that's what some of you guys are getting confused with. I just think that's healthy emotional independence, but I put that in there because I think that's where the confusion is getting into, some of these different terminologies, right? The next one is less reactive, which I've talked about a lot on my channel in general. It's very important to remain calm and clear instead of reacting based on insecurity, anger, fear, right? And so that is another way to have some sort of healthy, detachment in relationships. And why this very much helps is because by being less reactive, you're allowing your partner to see your needs without pushing them away from what the conversation is. Now, this doesn't mean that they're suddenly going to fulfill your needs. It doesn't mean they're going to listen to what you're saying right away and change today, but it means that they're able to understand where you're coming from because you're not covering it up, or not even covering it up, but the reaction in of itself is not distracting from the conversation and the need that is being addressed. And so that's very important. Less reactive in general, even if something bothers you that may have nothing to do with your partner. It's very important to maintain that sense of self. It allows you to feel more regulated and feel more in control. And another part that can be very beneficial is it allows you to not need so much reassurance in general, because sometimes the reassurance comes from trying to manage that heightened reaction. But if that heightened reaction is no longer present, you may need less reassurance, which can help balance the relationship. The next one is it allows, if you're the healthy perspective of detaching and trying to be more into your sense of self, why that can be beneficial is one way to do it is also have more clearer and compassionate expression of your needs. And so when you express your needs, which I've talked about plenty of times on this channel, it doesn't mean that you omit what you're feeling necessarily, but it means that coming across in a more compassionate, logical way. And when I mean compassion, I mean by understanding, whether it's indirectly or directly, why your partner did what they do. And it doesn't mean that you're going to suddenly go easy on them and let, bad behavior slide. No, not necessarily. It just means, let's say your partner yelled at you, which I hope that's not happening, but sometimes it does, right? And they made a mistake, they apologized. You can express your need and mention, I appreciate that you apologized, but one thing is I do not like being yelled at. I understand why you did it. I know that you didn't mean it like that, and I know you probably felt backed up in a corner, and that's my fault. I probably should have brought this up at a better time. However, I don't think yelling was necessary, and I hope that we can, going forward, both of us try and make sure this doesn't happen again. You stated your need, you expressed yourself, but you didn't do it in a way where you reprimanded them. You didn't say something like, I know you grew up in a household where your parents yelled, but that's not normal. You didn't say that, right? You implied that their perspective of emotional regulation might not be what you want and what you perceive as healthy, but you didn't make it in a way where you labeled them and made them feel like they're flawed. And so that's why that's important. The next one is it really helps when you're trying to focus inwardly about yourself and grow as a person while still maintaining your romantic relationship with your partner, your avoidant partner. It allows you to have personal growth. And what do I mean by that? Giving yourself some space is the better way to put it, is a good way to have some sort of healthy detachment, right? You're giving yourself space to pursue your own goals, your own passion, your own identity, and it actually makes you a more fulfilling partner. So going on trips by yourself, going out and eating with your friends or by yourself, trying new food, so you can bring that into your relationship and bring that into your own inner world so that you can share that with your partner, right? It would be unhealthy if you're doing this separately and not adding it to your relationship. You want interdependence. You always want interdependence. You're adding to your relationship. You're adding to yourself. You're building together, okay? The next one is as you detach from the outcomes of things. Maybe your partner is going to change, but you don't know when. Instead of expecting it to be changed right away, you detach from that outcome. Okay, I'm going to trust my partner. We'll see what happens. But if I really feel like it's going to be where it's too late, let's say 2 years go by and this thing that you've been wanting doesn't change, you trust yourself that you're going to walk out when that time is right. So you don't need to continuously check on yourself or on your partner. You have reduced that anxiety. You have detached from that outcome, if that makes sense. Now that we've talked about some of the elements of how to really detach in a healthy way, what are some unhealthy ways that this one is a little bit more common for avoidance? And this particular one that I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the manipulative portion. That will be after this. But this one is kind of like a detachment that I would say can signal disconnection and even kind of cut off emotional growth and kind of contribute to emotional withdrawal. And so there are a lot of risks to this, right? First one is that if you or your partner is doing this, you're avoiding vulnerability, which maybe you started to protect yourself, but what ends up happening is it actually leads to distance and the relationship in of itself becomes very stagnant, can be very frustrating. And if you're an avoidant person and you tend to do this, avoidant individuals do this, you're protecting yourself, but at what cost? What ends up happening is, just putting it in a relationship perspective, your partner is going to feel more negative towards you. They're going to feel more resentful. And honestly, they're going to pick more fights. I don't think many avoidants like that. And so it's really important to recognize opening up just a little bit. You don't have to open every single memory you have and share every trauma you have, things that you don't even care about anymore. But you can at least bring up, hey, I'm hanging out with Randy tonight. Before I come back home, I'm going to swing by that Chinese food place you like. Do you want me to pick something up for you? Just something. You're being vulnerable. It doesn't mean you said Randy and I are best friends. I remember having memories when we used to go fishing. You didn't go all the way deep, but you told, your partner, I'm doing this. You gave detail. You didn't say that, hey, I'm going to go play X, Y, and Z with my buddies. You didn't put it that blankly. You said the person's name. You said what you're going to do, and you added some connection, right? You added that sort of intimacy involved in opening up. It doesn't mean that that's just a small example. You can do anything. Maybe they asked, hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I have a little bit of a headache, but I'm hanging in there. Thank you for asking. Something very simple. Open up just a tiny bit. And the next one that can be, unfortunately, a risk of unhealthy detachment is lack of intimacy. What ends up happening is because you are actually to some extent detached from your partner, you actually erode closeness and trust. And what ends up happening, and if you're a person who wants to detach to try and gain some connection with your avoidant and you try to, pull away or be more emotionally available, you are actually breaking the trust in that relationship. The relationship cannot grow. And so a better way to do it is to lean into intimacy, even if it's not as extreme right away, but even just, briefly touching your partner on their shoulder or something without expecting anything in return. Eye contact, communicating in a calm but respectful tone, having, affection towards one another, even if it's verbal, like, by the way, I like what you did with your hair. Something small that increases that intimacy without feeling overly like you're trying to gain something out of somebody, right? The next one is communication breakdown. Now, if you're trying to pull away and detach in general, not even to control a partner, but just because you feel like it's just more comfortable, it's your default, what ends up happening is if you pull away too much and you stop sharing your thoughts and feelings, it can cause resentment and misunderstanding, which just creates more fights. And that's not fun for anybody involved, right? The next one is neglecting a relationship. And what ends up happening when I mean that is you minimize the importance of connection. And then what ends up happening is you make your partner feel like they're not important. And this can be a very big issue because what ends up happening is even if they are important, they're not going to trust your word because they don't feel important. And so it's actually a waste of both you and your partner's time when you could just lean in a little bit, and then you wouldn't have to continue to reassure your partner, or you wouldn't have to continue to fight for X, Y, and Z simply because you're just neglecting the relationship. If you lean in just a little bit, a lot of these issues will go away. And so what about using detachment as an indirect way of trying to change the outcome? What does this look like and what ends up happening? How can you find out if this is what you're doing? Because sometimes it's a little bit subconscious. So some people withdraw. Actually, sorry for the camera shake. Actually, I would say withhold affection and attention intentionally, right? So you pull away emotionally or physically, maybe just to get a reaction. Maybe you don't actually need space or you're not actually hurt, but you're doing it to make them anxious and kind of trigger them. And so typically the motivation is something like, let me act, like maybe it's going to be like you want to act detached so they miss you. Maybe they put in more effort. Maybe they worry about you. And so you're trying to get a reaction out of them. You don't actually need space. You're just making it so that they can chase you. And it's not healthy. You actually increase your own insecurity because what if they don't chase you? What's going to end up happening is a relationship with either stay detached or you're going to crash out, right? The next one is a lot of avoidants do not like this, by the way. This is really, avoidants do not like this. And I'll talk more about the risks of this at the end of the video, but deliberately silencing yourself or ignoring, or like, you know, the silent treatment, right? You stop answering messages, or you like try and do delayed responses, or you act distant, and you're not doing it for self-care. You're doing it to create insecurity in your partner. Sometimes it's like you're using silence as punishment. And so typically it's almost like you're trying to create insecurity and confusion so that they chase you, chase your approval, chase your interest, chase you as a person. And what did I mention about chasing? It's not always going to lead to love. It might just lead to games, honestly. And that's not necessarily healthy. The next one is making them prove their love is kind of like the way I would describe it. I guess so. It's like you detach emotionally until they basically prove what you're looking for. So they care by begging, apologizing, or chasing, right? And you act fine or like indifferent, detached, right? Just to test their loyalty, who they are. And the concept is almost like in your mind, the maladaptive thought is, if they really love me, they fight for me when I pull away. So it's a test, right? The next one is, some people do this, right? And it's not healthy. And anxious, preoccupied individuals can sometimes lean into this to try and get their partner's approval. Fearful avoidants do this naturally. So I'm not saying people who do this naturally. I'm saying this is unhealthy if you're doing it to gain your partner's connection and attention. It's like hot and cold behavior, right? One moment you're loving and available, the next you're emotionally distant. And I saw recently a couple doing this. Well, not a couple, the partner of the avoidant doing this. And it was actually making the avoidant individual want to break up. And so the reason why is avoidant individuals don't like that instability, that feeling, because they actually kind of feel like you're playing games. And it's almost like the goal was for this person to kind of create inconsistency to make their partner off balance so they're not sure where they stand. So they almost cave to what their partner is asking. And it's almost like, it's like they're trying to get you to be invested. Like the avoidant, the partner who's trying to manipulate or be hot and cold is to make their partner more invested. And when I'm saying that anybody who's doing this, I'm not saying that you're a bad person. I'm truly not saying you're a bad person. I am saying that this is what you think is a way for you to get what you want and what you deserve because you don't know any other way. And you feel like you don't really, somewhere it's because you don't think you deserve it. Or if you say it to your partner and they tell you they don't want to, that they don't love you. So you're not ready for all the conversations that it may take to get these things because you've been hurt. You've been traumatized very likely. And so don't blame yourself if you catch yourself doing this. Okay. It's not, don't, It's not a big deal. At the end of the day, who on this earth has not made mistakes? So please be gentle with yourself, be patient with yourself, be kind, because you didn't choose to have attachment issues. That's on your parents. And sadly, maybe your parents didn't even mean it either. Maybe their parents didn't. We don't know where this started, right? Likely there's a lot less malice as to why this happened than it truly is. So be patient with yourself, okay? The other one is individuals sometimes want to create jealousy, right? And that they do it through like detachment. Maybe they become distant, and I don't know, show like they have interest in other people, or to kind of quietly show they have other options. And usually it's like the goal is to make your partner feel like they could lose you. If they don't act right, then you could like walk out, right? And you want to kind of spark insecurity, so your partner almost like clings to you or begs to you or chases you, actually, right? And the reason why this is unhealthy is because it actually roots to behaviors that come from insecure wounds, right? The first one is a fear of vulnerability, right? Sometimes you play these games because you don't want to say, I need this, and you're afraid that your partner is going to say no, and you're going to feel rejected. You're afraid to feel that way. The next one is fear of abandonment. You don't want your partner to not chase you. You need to keep seeing it. You need to keep feeling loved all the time. You need a surplus of love sometimes. And it's hard because avoidants are not surplus of love. Like if you want a surplus of love, you're not going to get it from an avoidant. I'm being honest. It's definitely more on the bare bones scarcity type. And I'm not saying it's like breadcrumbs, but it's just harder to see because they're much more stoic. They're more detached. Avoidants are much more action based than verbal based. And that's just a different style of love. And it can be really hard to see if you really want a lot of proof, right? And it can be hard. It can be challenging, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It's a lot of avoidants give a very steady love, but it's hard to see because it's not as loud, right? And so what's a healthier alternative to some of these behaviors? A lot of y'all probably know that this is what I'm going to say. Communicate directly and accept that your needs might not be met right away. Genuine emotional detachment is about peace and boundaries and accepting things the way they are. It's not about games or manipulation. Your partner, maybe they say, okay, yeah, we can work on our issues in bedroom intimacy. Like I'm open to that, but they haven't given you a timeline. And so you're wondering, okay, when are we going to have it again? What's going on? But rather maybe lean into that. They said they're open to work on it. So give it some time. Then maybe focus on how you're going to work on it. Have a conversation, right? And so there are ways where relationships, they help you grow even if you don't know you need it. And this is kind of one of them. Now, I'm not saying stay with somebody who doesn't treat you right or doesn't meet your needs. But if they're meeting needs but not all of the things you want, nobody can do that. First of all, no one can meet every single one of your needs. But the other part is maybe they're just not meeting it now. It's up to you to decide, is it worth the investment? No marriage is perfect. No relationship is perfect. And it will never be. And so that's something to remember. So how does this backfire? How does manipulating a partner to try and get attachment from them while you detach, how does it backfire? Well, it creates a unhealthy dynamic. I would say like an off and on dynamic. Some people will call it toxic, right? Where it's basically instead of you're building trust, love, emotional safety, security, you're creating a cycle. You're creating like a push-pull, then anxiety, followed by relief, and then power instead of connection. The outcome is that the relationship tends to be unstable, but most importantly, it becomes very emotionally exhausting. And avoidant individuals, if something is emotionally exhausting, they will leave. Eventually, they will leave. And it will be unsatisfying for you too, because you're always trying to gain something that you can never fully have. Because once the cycle starts where they start feeling more connected to you again, and you feel like they're chasing, what's going to end up happening is you're going to feel like they're pulling away, and then you'll do it again, and it'll just cycle and cycle, and it's very, very unhealthy. The other one is if you are doing this, playing these games, and you're detaching in an unhealthy way because you're trying to get connection, avoidance will take this as a sign that you're not a good partner for them, because they're going to perceive it as, just being honest, they'll perceive it as like mentally unstable, because you're behaving one way you're this way, another way you're that way. They're going to perceive it, even if they don't know you're manipulating them or they don't know you're playing games or whatever, they just perceive you as something that's unstable, and they don't like instability in their life. Because avoidant individuals, if they have to sit there and read your emotions, that's not fun for them. Most people know avoidance, it's hard for them to read your emotions. Now there's like a new variable involved. they're probably going to walk away, and they may sense the manipulation. They may not want to chase you, and they probably will walk away. And it's usually because these individuals don't like to tolerate emotional games, especially because they're going to think, is this how my marriage is always going to be? Is this how a relationship will be if we get married? I don't want this. It's not worth it. And also, if this is who you are and this is what you need, I can't give you that all the time. I'm getting tired. Maybe I should leave so you can find somebody better. That's how they're going to feel, okay? The other one is it erodes trust over time because they start feeling like it's inauthentic, and your partner may second guess your feelings. If you do say something that's vulnerable, they might not trust it because sometimes you're pulling away and putting that dynamic. They will assume that your love might be conditional. If they don't do something that you want, then you start pulling away. They're going to feel like, okay, I have to do everything you want, otherwise you're not going to love me. I can't stay then. And emotional closeness really dies, right? And actually what happens is the avoidant will end up becoming more distant because they want to protect themselves, right? The next one is they feel like you're not very authentic. And you're going to feel like this too. You're going to feel like you're drained with your own self. It's going to require like a lot of calculation. It prevents genuine expression of love. You're afraid to say that you miss them because you want them to say it first, for example. So you're going to find a way for them to say it. And then you end up feeling very alone because you're investing so much more than they are because you're playing a lot of these games. And so it can be very difficult because if your partner also feels like you're inauthentic, they're probably not going to want to be there because they don't even know the real you anymore, right? And the very last one, which is very common for avoidant individuals, the risks of doing this, is because it basically triggers their fear. Their fear has always been that love is unstable. It requires a lot of work. There's a lot of reading involved. And they're going to basically feel like, okay, I have to read your mind, or I have to figure this out, or this means this, and I don't know what's going on. And if anyone has recognized the feeling of manipulation, like a lot of my patients describe it as like you're behind a glass wall and there's like a sound, there's like a muffled sound. Like you're trying to figure it out. No one can hear you. You don't know how to say it fully and you're very confused. Like that's how a lot of people describe it. I don't know if that made sense, but a lot of patients describe it like that, like being manipulated. A lot of avoidants know how that feels because they feel that constant confusion. And so what ends up happening is they think, okay, relationships are difficult. They are a lot of work. I don't want to be here. Like I give up. And that means their emotional investment is gone. And once that is gone, a lot of avoidance is very hard to retrieve that. Like once it's gone, it's gone. So to basically answer anyone's question, can detaching help avoidance get closer? Yes, but only if you consider detaching I wouldn't call it detaching, but we are gonna for this moment. Basically, if you do it for your own self, you put more investment in yourself without not nurturing the relationship. So you're still nurturing the relationship, but you're also nurturing yourself. That can help. But if you're pulling the nurture away from your partner and onto X, Y, and Z, that's going to hurt the relationship, no matter who you are. I hope this video made some sense. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.